Hi, welcome back to another video in the Cover to Cover workshop, and I just wanted to give you an idea of my early years albums. There's 2 volumes at the moment, but you'll see that they're getting to a point where they'll need to be more soon. And just talk you through a few lessons I've learned and a few different oddball things that you might want to keep in mind in case they're useful. So we'll start at the very beginning, and indeed my early years album starts before I was born with a couple of pages with photos from earlier generations. So this is my mom when she was a baby with my grandparents, and then a double page layout about my mom and her sister growing up. So those two both predate me, but they're really the only 2 pages that I've ever scrapped before my own birth, so I don't have enough to make them a separate album or anything. So at the moment they exist here, and I think sometime in the future I might work with more photos like that, more older photos that are older than me, and then I could separate them out into an album all its own. So then I start into baby pictures, and it all goes in pretty much chronological order from here on out. I have scrapbooked a lot of these photos. Everything was scrapbooked in a random order, but a lot of it was when the photos came to me. So people had sent me different images at different times, or I'd found things in different boxes and things like that. So I don't actually have anything in my album about my birth. The earliest page I have is my first Christmas, and then it jumps to my first birthday, and from there you'll see that there are times when there are quite a few photos in a small expanse of time, and then there are other times where there's a big jump in time where I haven't found any photos there yet. One lesson. Here's something that you may have noticed before if you've seen this page. I only really have one Easter photo that I've come across so far, even though there would have been an Easter celebration every year. And instead of just writing about this single Easter, because this is, I was only a year and a half, so I wouldn't actually remember this Easter at all. I used this space to journal about different Easter memories, because I don't have more photos at this point in time anyway. I don't have any more photos to scrapbook with all those different thoughts. So I just added them all on one page and titled it that way, but I still file it with the date of that photo. So just one little idea. Now with older photos like this, I am scrapbooking original prints, but I make a backup copy first. So this is a Polaroid, and this is an original film print that came with the rounded corners and everything. But what I would do is I would make a digital copy first, so that I have that backed up with all my photos, and all my photos are in multiple libraries, so that there's a backup to the backup kind of thing. And then I scrapbook the actual print. And if it goes wrong, then I have the backup. Or if I decide I want that picture without anything ever stuck to it, then I can do that. And if possible, I just add the adhesive so that it's not actually stuck on top of the photo, because things like this that overlap, there's plenty of room to put the adhesive on these pieces and not really have glue on top of the picture. So if I really, really desperately wanted to get it out of there, or at some point in time somebody decided they did not like the scrapbooks but they wanted to keep the photos, both of those things could easily be accomplished. And one other thing, you may notice that sometimes the pictures come all from one event, but I scrapbook them separately. So these 3 Polaroids are all from the same short expanse of time. But the reason I've scrapbooked them all separately, one, because I just enjoy single page layouts, or single photo layouts, but also because there were different things I wanted to write about each one. So they were all 3 about a weekend spent at a family, well, not really beach house, more like lake house, that somebody in the extended family had that we could go to in the summer, and a big trip like that. But there are different things in each one that I wanted to talk about. So I talk about remembering the experience of being there on the lake and things like that. I remember, well, and I journal about what I know about the Ozarks itself, and the area where where this happened and things like that. And then this one, because it was 3 generations, myself with my mom and my gran, and the journaling is on a perspective about just the girls in the family. So I didn't feel like I had to cram all of that into one page. Just because I have 3 photos from one event doesn't mean I can't spend 3 separate pages talking about 3 different things. But sometimes I will go ahead and put them together. So I have 2 Polaroids from this particular birthday party, and I went ahead and put those together as one event. Because there's really one story I wanted to tell behind that. It's a story about how I didn't understand that most people chose a different birthday cake every year. So for 3 birthdays running, I picked the same birthday cake because that was the only one I wanted. And then it just keeps going in chronological order. So because I came into most of these photos in later scrapbooking, not at the very beginning. They tend to be 12 by 12 pages, but you'll see different styles. There's a few years between the creation of these 2 different pages, for example. You'll see double page spreads as well. And when I am happy with everything is in a pretty good order, I will stitch these like one I showed you in an earlier video. But when I'm still working quite a lot on photos from that time, or I know I have a big stack, I tend to wait just to make sure I sew things in the right place. And I know I have some things that I have notated to come back. So for example, this page, there's a lot to this story, but there's only a little bit on the page, and it's hard to see here, but it's much easier to see in person. There's a little bit of writing here, but really there's a very long story behind my memories of trips to the museum. So I'm going to add probably a 6 by 12 page that's just a whole page of typed journaling to try and tell that story as much as possible. But I'm still working on drafting what I want to say and get it quite right. So I know that that's going to come in here somewhere, but it's not there yet, and that's okay. Everything's a work in progress. Again, double page, so that'll go together eventually. And then here I get into some mixing up of different things. So this came from a time when I was working in all sorts of different page sizes, and it mostly fits a 6 by 12 page protector. It's actually a tiny bit smaller. So I may end up trying to perhaps put this on a 6 by 12 sheet, but the other idea I had was to take this and make it top of or bottom of a page so it would go horizontal instead of vertical. But that's just something I haven't come back to do yet. So it lives in a 6 by 12 page protector just fine. It's nice and safe. It's easy to see. No problem. This is one of the very earliest layouts I did, and I only have 1 page of the layout. There was another side, and so far I haven't found it yet. But I don't want to lose this part, so it's here. It's in the album, but the journaling, the title, everything else that went with it is gone. And it may turn up, it may not, and so eventually if I think I'm not going to find it, I'll go back and just start trying to figure out how I could work with what's there. And then some 8.5 by 11 pages that are complete and things like that, but an older layout, and this was made in about 2001, I would say. But then this one, with the same photos, very same pictures, was made several years later to tell a different story, very different style. So my style had changed not only in the page size, but in the kind of supplies I used. At this point, I never used pattern paper. I was only just starting to handwrite, and if I did handwrite, I always did everything in pencil and printed first, and then I went back over it with a pen, and now I definitely just write in my own handwriting and don't spend all that extra time worrying about it. But I had a different story that I wanted to tell here, so I went ahead and did that in a different style several years later. But that left me with this gap. So this was one of the times when I would take a cue from the old page to bridge to the new page. So to make this page size seem completely normal, I printed one of the photos at just smaller than the 8.5 by 11 page size. Then I took the color cues from this layout and tried to come up with something that would connect these colors with these colors. So I used the shades of blue and pink here, but I took October Afternoon pattern paper because that was what I'd used over here, so they're a similar style. I repeated one punch, and although there aren't butterflies over here, the idea of shapes that repeat, that appears on both. So I'm just trying to mix that up a little bit, and then brought the hearts in here, which comes into the embellishment on the other side. So I'm just trying to bridge the gap with something that was very simple and quick and didn't take much time. Now, these pages are actually in the process of moving from this album, and I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit next week. So I just want you to keep in mind where they are right now. This is where they started in my early years album, and recently they've found a new home. But for right now, they're here. Sometimes the pages have a lot more to journal than what would fit in my own handwriting. So in those cases, I do go back and just type it out, and that's just actually done in a really small font so that I could put quite a bit on there. But I didn't worry about the page design first. I wrote all the journaling before I started the layout, and then decided, okay, so how could I get that on the page? And sometimes that's a really good way to start a layout. If you have a story that you want to tell, don't even worry about the rest. Don't worry about the photo, don't worry about the embellishment. Worry about the words first, and then see how much you have, and then you can get an idea of how you could design around that and find other things that will go. It jumps around quite a lot, so I'm going through several years here really quickly, but that's just because there are those are the photos that I had available, so there are gaps. That's okay. They'll get filled eventually. And a few other things where there are pages that are different sizes. These are actually layouts that aren't really made. So it's kind of a placeholder. I have these two 8x10 shots, and I haven't actually made a whole layout about them, but I wanted them to be in my